Hi, and welcome to Good Reasons to Believe. I'm just kidding. This is obviously not Alan Darley doing this show today. I'm filling in for him because he had some unforeseeable circumstances come up, and I was asked last night to cover this time slot. I'm gonna do my best, and in the spirit of what Alan does, I wanted to talk about what I believe are good reasons to believe. Now, this is not the show Good Reasons to Believe. This is not sanctioned by Alan Darley, so nothing that I say should be representative of what he might have wanted to go on here at all. But hopefully he will get the opportunity to address it next week. I don't know. But I wanted to make my best go at it. So I'm Greg Brahe, and I'm an atheist. Um, Before I get into what a good reason to believe is, I wanted to go through a couple of stipulative definitions, and this is something that I think is really important, and we've kind of missed the mark on in a few of our other conversations. Given that Dr. Jones is a linguist, and so is Bob, we have a lot of times when the language flux and the fact that words have usage and not meaning becomes almost a barrier, in my opinion, to getting to the final point, because we spend so much time working on language. So I want to talk a bit about what I mean by believe, first of all. Um, I wrote something down here, so I have a bit of an outline today. To believe something, as I'm using it, means to accept something as tentatively true. And that's significant. It's tentatively true. And of course, an accurate understanding of reality. From an atheist perspective, that means that I do not believe that a God is a true and accurate understanding of reality. But what's pertinent to this is that it is given the best information that we have available at the moment. So that's the whole definition. To believe something means to accept something as tentatively true and accurate, or as a tentatively true and accurate understanding of reality, given the best information we have available at the moment. A belief should never define reality, but should be defined by reality. If reality is proven to be inconsistent with a belief, then belief should be changed to justify that. I'm sorry, to remain consistent with reality. I think that one of the biggest issues that we run into with our beliefs is that they far too frequently become a replacement for reality. They become a lens through which we view the world instead of a lens. I'm sorry, a picture of the world. Um, Finally, just because belief is internally consistent and coherent, and even if it can be reconciled absolutely with reality, does not necessarily make it justified. As an example, I was in a discussion on Facebook recently where somebody was talking about the genetic diversity in life, specifically talking about Adam and Eve, and how we can account for in the young Earth creationist framework the massive amount of genetic diversity, even within only humans, that exists if we have only been around for 6,000 years and we came from a single breeding pair. Now that's obviously a big issue. There's been some different ways it's been interpreted, specifically some damaging ones, such as the Hermetic hypothesis, where, of course, and not only have we had two breeding pairs, but then we had a massive bottleneck where only one family and their spouses was selected for in the Great Flood. Um, so that's twice we've really narrowed down the genetic diversity of humans, according again to the framework of young Earth creationism. So the question then is, how do we have all of the different races that we have, the different, as the term in biology goes, clades, which means basically a lineage, a group that would have consistent genetic traits within them. And that's a really significant question. If you want to look at 6,000 years, then actually what's interesting about that is for anybody to say, well, in 6,000 years of human breeding, that's roughly, I can't do that math off the top of my head here, 1,200 generations, maybe 1,500 generations, if we assume a generation is about 20 years. So, in that amount of time, if we went from a single family to the incredible amount of genetic diversity that we have today, then young Earth creationists have almost made a better argument for evolution than any biologist has ever had. That's a massive amount of genetic diversity that's come around. But that notwithstanding, we still need to come to address the question of where it came from initially. So I came up with a solution. Yes, an atheist came up with a way that we could interpret Adam and Eve as having enough genetic material that we could have the genetic diversity that we have on Earth today. The simple solution to that is Adam and Eve were special creations. They were created by this God that we can assume, one, they weren't born, so they didn't have belly buttons. What would be the point? They didn't have an umbilical cord. They were different from us in many ways. They were said to be perfect before the fall. So if we want to look at something as perfect before the fall, it is entirely possible that Adam and Eve did not have a 46 chromosome. Wow, drawing a blank on this word now. Genome. They could have had millions of chromosomes and non-paired, just completely independently floating around in their nuclei. And whenever they produced an egg or sperm, 23 of those millions, from those millions, were selected and put individually into each egg and each sperm. Therefore, there's a huge, massive shuffling of cards, and the odds of duplication are almost none. Therefore, the next generation, I mean, this would be the intelligent design right here, is if you did that, then the next generation could interbreed absolutely without any fear of having abnormalities related to inbreeding. They'd have a completely different genetic framework that they're working in. It's a perfect solution to that problem. And it's a perfect solution because I made it up to be a perfect solution to that problem. I could believe that to be true. As a matter of fact, there's plenty of practice of doing that within any framework or any worldview somebody has. When there's evidence that comes up, they reinterpret their worldview, or they reinterpret the evidence in a way that allows their worldview to remain consistent. And I have to admit that I have done that as well. Everybody does it. We are human. We do not have perfect reasoning. But that doesn't mean that we should not strive to have our beliefs be a justifiable representation of reality. So I wanted to move on to what a justified belief is. Now, there are two ways that you can interpret that terminology. The first one is justified within a framework. This is what I do. I did a Bible study yesterday with a friend of mine and his father. They are Jehovah's Witnesses. And we got together and talked about the Bible. From specifically can't speak here. Specifically the translations that the Jehovah's Witnesses use, the New World Translation. And reading a book that went through, actually I have the book here, What Does the Bible Really Teach? We're reading a book about the kingdom of God. And from this framework, I set aside my skepticism of the accuracy of the Bible as far as a representation of reality, and I look at it as a literary study. The Bible itself is a narrative. It has it's several narratives. It's strung together, but it has a framework that it itself creates. And within that framework, we can talk about if something is internally consistent. The same is true of Harry Potter, of The Lord of the Rings, of any fiction or any narrative you want to grant. There is certainly a way that we can test it against itself. It's really important to recognize that fact, and frankly, that is one of my favorite things to do. It's incredibly entertaining for me. As a matter of fact, to go on a little bit of a tangent here, there's a series of books called The Inheritance Cycle, where it's about a person who ends up becoming what they call a rider, a dragon rider. He's chosen by a dragon, who are very intelligent and magical beings. And through the process, he learns how to use magic in different ways. Now, there's a restriction on magic in this literary framework that To lift a rock using magic, it takes just as much energy as it would have taken to lift it using your hands. Um, that's a significant limitation to magic. However, this character learns down the road that it's possible to draw energy from your environment, from the plants, the animals that are surrounding you, even the bacteria, the microorganisms, and draw energy away from their life force um, to aid you in this. And under that literary framework, the only thing I can imagine is they're fighting a war during this, and that the most efficient way to fight a war would be to draw your energy away from the enemy soldiers to cast spells on the enemy soldiers. And that's never once addressed in the framework of the book. And it drove me nuts. It seems like the kind of thing that it just simple and logical given the rules that are granted to us in that framework. Now, I'm going to go on record here and say magic doesn't exist and people don't ride dragons. So this has been an entirely hypothetical thought experiment. But it still bothered me because it was aggravating that they didn't go into the questions that worldview naturally bring up, or that framework, not that worldview. When you give a stipulative set of rules, you have certainly created an environment in which something can be extrapolated. We can move forward under that and say, well, what would this lead to? If these premises are true, how can we go from there? And I think that is one of the biggest problems that theology has come to in the past, with the way that they use knowledge and logic in that manner, in saying this premise is true and therefore we can take from this premise these conclusions. I have a difficult time accepting any premise as absolutely true. That I think, and this would be, I guess, axiomatic in a way, that premises should always be granted as ifs, if this premise is true, at least when we're talking about things like theology. Because under that framework, I am happy to discuss your theology with you at any point and stay entirely within your framework. That does not, however, mean that your theology is necessarily a justified belief outside of that framework. And that's, I wanted to get into now what I mean by a justified belief. First of all, it is a belief that is not only possible, but is probable and necessary as an explanation for a given phenomenon or circumstance. It must be compelling to people other than yourself. It must be dependent upon the best evidence available to you, and it must be dependent upon the minimum amount of assumptions related to it. That's a concept in science known as parsimony, also called Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is the one that should be accepted, and that's a philosophical stance, not necessarily something that is independently verifiable. And it also must be a conclusion that any other person could draw given the same evidence. So this is the basis of my epistemological framework, the way that I feel that things can be thought of or known in a way. And I try to avoid the word known because it seems like such an absolute, but things can be believed if they fit these epistemological rules that I believe are completely valid. This has some admitted weaknesses. First of all, there are some beliefs that everybody holds, including myself, that are not and even cannot be supported in this way. I can name dozens off the top of my head, but specifically we'll go with beliefs of values. What things, anything normative in that respect of what should we be concerned about? Should I be concerned about if my actions hurt other people? Well, that's a value statement. I can certainly make the argument that yes, I can, and I should be, and everybody should be, but it's very, very difficult to support that with evidence. That is a philosophical question, and sometimes outside of the scope of this kind of epistemology. There's also the problem that even if a belief is entirely justified, that every piece of evidence that we have at the moment points to it being true, it can still be entirely false. And that belief could be completely a misunderstanding or misrepresentative of reality. And that's a significant weakness to this. That's why, epistemologically speaking, I am now and will likely always be what I call agnostic. I will very rarely commit to anything in an absolute sense. There are some things that can be committed to in an absolute sense, such as I believe I just said that last sentence. I absolutely do believe that. That is a statement of fact, and there is no way for anybody to not say that that is true because I am giving it from a self-referential viewpoint. But that doesn't mean that I even necessarily did say that out loud. I could be dreaming. It doesn't mean that you have to believe that I did. It just means that I believe that I did, and that is an absolutely true statement. So there are things that can be known within a certain frame of reference. The next major weakness, beyond things possibly being entirely false, or certain things being possibly false, is that the things that we can know or believe according to this framework are dependent upon evidence, of course, and the evidence that we have as humans is extremely, extremely limited. If you think about all of the information that's possible, even if we restrict our scope only to Earth, the planet Earth, it's just insurmountably large compared to what we actually have. We have an infinitesimal amount of all available information upon which we are making our decisions. That's a weakness, and that's why we should constantly be looking for more information. The inquisitive nature of humanity is a very, very significant advantage to us. And the moment that we say, nope, we have enough information, we're comfortable with this belief, is the moment we stop learning and we stop growing. Finally, all humans are subject to bias, and significantly subject to bias. This is something that I admit I am a huge victim of bias, and I like to think of myself as an objective thinker, which in itself is a bias. I am prone to thinking that I'm right and you're wrong until proven otherwise. I am prone to thinking that my frame of reference, my way of viewing something, even interpreting evidence, is the correct way until it is presented to me in a very compelling way that that's false. I believe it was Mark Twain who said it is much easier to fool a person than it is to convince a person that they have been fooled. And to me, I think that that is one of the most significant realities that we need to address when we're considering what is a good reason to believe and what is not. We are prone to all kinds of inaccurate interpretation of evidence and many, many other errors in reasoning. So all of this has been more of an introduction than anything else as to what I wanted to talk about on the show today. And that is the question that we've so often asked. And Alan is asking with his show that normally goes during this time slot. And Bob and I discuss, and Dr. Jones discusses, and William discusses, and well, Joey and Matt don't really discuss much. But but aside from that, I feel like it is so frequently glanced over that the question we're talking about is not and never has been, does a God or do gods exist? That's a question that is an absolute statement of fact. The answer to that is, I don't know, and it's possible that we cannot know. That is a direct and absolute question of reality. So I don't think that that is a justifiable question even in this sense. The question is, can we justifiably believe that a God or gods exist? That's a completely different matter. Now, I obviously as an atheist, will argue no. And that's something that comes up far more often than you'd think in all kinds of different situations. But we don't ever really address the question in that sense. We always seem to look at it in this absolute, I already don't believe that a God exists. You may already believe that a God exists. So we start talking about the question of does God exist instead of should either of us be holding the beliefs that we do. And that's, I think, where Alan really does us all a service with his show, Good Reasons to Believe, because he talks about reasons to believe, not just believing and the consequences of belief. That doesn't seem like that big of a distinction, but in my mind, it's an enormous difference. The question of reasons to believe is one of the things that I think we should always be constantly readdressing and constantly be examining ourselves. If we are not putting our reasons to believe out on the table for other people to scrutinize, then what we're doing is cloistering ourselves. We are hiding away from challenges. And we're just saying, I believe, and putting that out. We're putting a facade out for the world to see, while the framework of it is hidden away behind this wall of belief. The New Covenant group is different than that, and I wanted to take a little bit of time to address that. This week, we do a production meeting every week on Mondays, and this week we talked significantly about putting together a mission statement of sorts or a statement of cause. Even that is a terminology nightmare on occasions, but how do we address that, and how do we describe what the New Covenant group is to other people? That can be difficult. I mean, right now we are running a series on the question, is church harmful? And in that series, we've had P.Z. Myers. We are going to have Jonathan, I think it's Kiefer. I don't want to say his name wrong, but we are going to have the president or former president, I wasn't totally clear on that, of the Florida atheist. Yep, Jonathan Kiefer, I did say that right, who's also an activist, has faced jail time and even prison time for some of the civil disobedience that he's done to defend his belief in a secular government, and many of the other things that are very significant to himself and to many other people. We're about to have Eric Hovind join us again, along with Dave Silverman of American Atheists, to discuss this question of, is church harmful? We have a show that is hosted by an atheist and co-hosted by the unconventional pastor, a former minister who now has his own show as well. We have William doing his show about the, I always have difficulty remembering the translation, but El Vinculo Perfecto, the beauty and wonder of life in so many ways. So we have a huge variety. I mean, that I'm just covering a sample of them. Of course, we have the place, we have T-Bog, we have Stephen's show. This is embarrassing. I should have written down this list beforehand. Trying to do it off of memory is bad. But the New Covenant group has a huge variety of different frameworks, but the one thread that I think ties us all together is that we all have questions and we all have an honest drive to examine why things are believed and what the consequences of those beliefs are. Honesty is a significant factor in all of this, and without our willingness to put our beliefs on the table and our reasons for believing on the table, we're never going to be able to move forward. Through human history, people have been killed. They've been murdered for questioning beliefs. They've been locked away. They've been devastated. It's still, in much of the world, a crime to blaspheme, to speak out against the name, to be a heretic. And the New Covenant group is different than that. We're trying to get away from that and push people away from that, to expose the harm and the danger of that. So even though right now I'm an atheist filling in for what is most likely our most classical theist in the network, he and I are friends. We know each other. We discuss things on a cordial basis, and we challenge each other. I have no idea how many times I have read Alan writing something like, under atheism, there's no way to, I can't come up with an exact example right now, but he's criticizing the very way that I see the world. And what's my reaction to that? I welcome it. That is the best thing that anybody can do. That is a service. That is what a good friend will do if they want to help you grow. I can't understand in the world that we have today why people would ever want to hide their reasons to believe from the world and to not put them out there so that anybody and everybody can challenge them. Because in the end, our beliefs are not the authority. They are the reflection of the reality that is out there. And reality should be our authority. There's no way that I can believe something today that will change the fact that the sun rises in the east. There's no way I can change something today that will. Sorry, I'm making a bit of a reference here now to Bill O'Reilly with Dave Silverman, our guest for next week. He is specifically talking about sun goes up, sun comes down. You can't explain that. Tide comes in, tide goes out. You can't explain that. And the reality is that we can explain it. We have beliefs about how these things happen, and we have good beliefs and bad beliefs and justified beliefs and unjustified beliefs. And the way that we've done that is by examining why these things happen. There was a time when the sun rose because Apollo pulled it across the sky with his chariot, according to the beliefs of many people. Does that mean that Apollo pulled the sun across the sky? No. It means that people believed that. And it means, in the end, that people were wrong. And the only way that we found that out was by not killing people who were saying, I don't think that's accurate. I don't think that the earth is actually the center of the universe and that everything is revolving around us. It matters. It matters to question these things, and it matters if we have any desire at all of moving forward. So I think on that note, I've kind of come to an end point in my main series. I wanted to give an opportunity for any viewers to send in questions or to send in comments. And then I wanted to move on to something that I initially had thought when I first did my show with Bob. I did not know the direction we were going to end up going, didn't know what kind of relationship. I'd never even met Bob before, about 20 minutes before the first show that we did. Never had a conversation with him. So it was exciting for me. But given the absolutely open framework that we had, it was really difficult to know what we might do. So if we don't have any viewer questions or comments, I wanted to touch on a few of the books that I have sitting back here and recommend them to viewers. Make a little bit of a book study of this today. The first one, I've mentioned this before. I'd like to get this author on at some point. This is an author named Guy P. Harrison. Wrote this book, 50 Reasons People Give for Believing in a God. Now, what's interesting is you will probably, I have not seen every show that Alan is ever going to do, but you will probably not see many of these reasons ever make it onto his show. Because the reality is that the reasons that Alan talks about and the reasons that many of us talk about in this show tend to be very, very academic, very lofty in ways, because it's something that we're nerds and we focus on, and it takes us a lot of time to examine all of these things. I think that in the academic sense, we have lost a little bit of the reality. So I wanted to go over it. I mean, it's a very easily delineated book, but it has a series of beliefs that were derived from interviews with over 1,000 people saying, why do you believe in a God? And it's a simple question. And he just, open-ended question, cataloged the answers people gave. Now, people are often even taken aback by that question. Why would you want to know why I believe in a God. That actually led to the very first point, or the very first chapter is, well, why would you even question that? My God is obvious. That was the very first reason that he examines in there. Um, there's the argument from popularity. Almost everybody on earth is religious, therefore I'm religious. Um, or the question that we're addressing right now, even on the is church harmful, is my faith is a good thing, or faith in general is a good thing. Let's see. Evolution is bad. And that is an argument I could even make, that evolution is a pretty horrible system that has a lot of needless suffering. Believing in a God makes me happy. That's one that I recently even debated that with Alan a bit, that if it's true that believing in a God makes you happy, and that's your only reason for believing. Now, you may have other reasons, but if that's your only reason to believe, what you are doing is you're exercising in self-delusion. It would make me very happy to believe that my grandpa, who was a very significant portion of my childhood and died on, well, his funeral was on my 13th birthday. It would make me very, very happy if I believed that I could go downstairs and chat with Grandpa and introduce him to my son and talk to him about the things that I was too immature to talk about as a 13-year-old. I didn't understand. To know more about his life, his history, his experiences in the war and storming the beaches of Normandy. He was there. He was shot there. It would be really, really comforting. It would make me happy to believe that. But that wouldn't make it true. And so that argument, my belief makes me happy. It's one that I wish sometimes that I could even try to use that to push myself forward. But this book, it goes through so many different reasons, the 50 of them, oddly enough. It's like that was the initial title of the book, and I recommend it to everybody. I would love to get this author on the show at some point, but the reasons to believe are not always these academic reasons that we go over and we spend so much time discussing on the show. They're not even always based on the Bible or any religious text. We have plenty of time. I mean, I was on Dr. Jones's show, not this last Wednesday, but the one before, and we spent over an hour talking about the verse, Matthew 25:46, and the framework around it, or the context it's in. There are thousands of pages in the Bible that each one of them has hundreds of verses on it. So we could, or about 100, I guess, but we could spend a lot of time going over the Bible if we want to spend that much time on it. And there's plenty of people that do, but there's plenty of people who would be happy to go, I don't need it. I'm going to put the Bible down. I believe in a God because I believe in a God. I believe in something greater than myself, that there's a higher power out there. And that's okay. I personally think that that's a bit more honest even than using any book as an authority for what to do. But it's significant because we don't even talk about that. We don't ask those questions, and we don't want people to ask the questions. We hide from it. And once again, that's why I'm part of the New Covenant group. That as an atheist, to me, I was so impressed by even just being invited to be on the show in the first place. And then to be invited to do my own show, to host, was incredibly significant. And to be invited to be on more shows and discuss some of these things, that's something that is a rare, rare form in the world today. That even now, the series that we're doing on Is Church Harmful is making people leave our group or walk away from us to not want to be part of it anymore because they're afraid of even asking the question or experiencing the responses. They're upset that we're inviting more atheists to be part of the show. And let's be honest here, we're inviting more than just atheists. We're going to have Eric Hovind on the show as well. We've been inviting priests and preachers and very unconventional people. Even just this last Wednesday, Dr. Jones had another preacher on the show, and he had invited me to be on it. Unfortunately, if you can't hear it in my voice, I'm a little sick, getting over that. So I was not able, I couldn't speak very well on Wednesday, and I was very tired. So I was disappointed that I could not be part of that. But we're trying to include people from many, many different areas to discuss these questions, and to to try to come together and challenge the reasons that we believe and the reasons and the consequences of those beliefs. So the series Is Church Harmful is not necessarily about what reasons we have to believe, but more about the consequences of those beliefs. And in a way, the church as an authority creating beliefs or telling us things that we should believe. And that itself is a reason. That's actually a reason listed in here. The argument from authority. So-and-so told me I should believe, so I believe. My preacher, my parents, my culture. It's a reason. But is it a good reason? Is it a justified reason to believe? Well, I also have this book by Michael Shermer, which actually, this one might, signed by Michael Shermer. He is a ardent skeptic, the founder of the Skeptics Society. He's a neurobiologist, I believe, and does most of his research on the reasons, on belief. I actually have a series of his books back here. The Science of Good and Evil. I have this one. I think I have another one, but I'm not seeing it at the moment. But this one is Why People Believe Weird Things. Now, weird things, it does have a chapter on religion and on various other things. But this question of good reasons to believe, as I'm talking about it today, if you'll notice, I said that it applies to God, but it's not limited only to the question of God. As a matter of fact, there's plenty of things that people believe. And as I mentioned, there are some things that cannot be verified, but things that people believe that are not true, and sometimes are objectively strange. Astrology is one of those beliefs. I ate at a Chinese restaurant the other day, and on the placemat, they had the Chinese zodiac, which has like the rat, the dog, the bull. I don't remember all of them. I believe I was born in the year of the rat. I don't remember. I question anybody who can put any faith in the idea that the year you were born is going to have a massive impact on who you are as a person in any way different from other people around you. Now, yes, the culture that you grow up in will change based on the year you were born. My son now knows more. He grabbed my smartphone the other day. He opened it up, unlocked it, called my mom, and left her a voicemail message. He is barely 2 years old. I could not have done that at 2 years old because this is a completely foreign object to me. As a matter of fact, I had difficulty making phone calls on it on my friends' smartphones when they first got them. So yes, there's a cultural impact of the world in which you grow up that is related to the year you were born. But let's take that a step further. Let's go to the zodiac, the traditional, I think it was Greek in origin, where not just the year in which you were born, but actually the month, the relative arbitrary position of planets and stars and constellations that were chosen randomly by pictures people saw in the sky are significant in your life. Or this fortune cookie. I ate at this restaurant and I got a cookie that had a slip of paper in it. And I wish I'd kept it. I don't remember what it said, but I believe it was, you have a great journey in store for yourself. Now that can be interpreted to mean anything. Of course I have a great journey in store for myself. I have a life ahead of me. If I died right now, even that could be considered a journey. Anything could be interpreted as a great journey ahead. But people believe these things. People put a lot of stock into fortune cookies. And in this book, Michael Shermer examines why people believe weird things. It's a fantastic read. It goes into some evolutionary arguments behind sort of the kinds of errors you can make about personification or agents. In the end, it boils down to the difference of, say, I guess the best example he gave himself is if you're walking you're an ancient ancestor of humans, walking the savannah of Africa, and you hear a rustle in the bushes behind you, you have two potential conclusions that you can make. One, it's nothing. It's not harmful. It's the wind or some small rodent. Two, it's a predator. It's a evil agent or a malicious agent that intends to harm me. Now, what happens if you make the second conclusion that it's a malicious agent with intent to harm you, and it turns out it was a bunny? Nothing. Your heart goes up a little bit. You get a little excited. Your nervous system kicks in. But in the end, you had a moment of adrenaline, and you're done. You survived. The other option, though, the other kind of error you can make is the type 1 error when you hear rustling in the bush behind you and you say, oh, it's nothing. That's just a bunny. It's the wind. It's a rustling. And it turns out it's a lion, and that lion eats you. You are now removed from the gene pool. So if that is in any way a hereditary trait, the kind of mistakes that we might make, that one is certainly selected against. The thinking something is not an intelligent or malicious agent, when in fact it is something that can get you killed, especially in the wild. Therefore, it makes perfect sense. Sorry, I forgot to turn my phone on silent there. It makes perfect sense that humans would make this error all the time. We see faces in the clouds. We see intention behind nearly everything. And that's why horoscopes and things like that work as well, because we think that there's a plan for what's happening around us. I would argue that that is a very good reason to believe that people believe in gods. That's a compelling reason to me that people would see an intelligent agent where there is not or may not be one. We used to apply the term gods for thunder, for lightning, for natural disasters. There's some people who still do. There's people who believe that Superstorm Sandy was punishment for gay marriage, or who knows what else they might have decided that it arbitrarily upset some deity for. But the long and short of it is bad things happen. There are things that happen, and there's people who would like an explanation for that. And according to Michael Shermer, it makes perfect sense that explanation can be a complete mistake. It's something that we will see an intelligent agent when there's not one. Last book I have for you it's an older one. It's an oldie but a goodie. This is B.F. Skinner's Beyond Freedom and Dignity. This one, it comes into play a lot. Alan talks quite a bit, actually, about free will. Under atheism, things are deterministic. There's no such thing as free will. That book makes a pretty compelling argument that that's actually pretty accurate. That determinism is something that it makes most of, if not all of our decisions for us. That the free will that we believe we have is an illusion. I think that that's a bit of a mistake to say it that way. More, we should be saying that it's an interpretation of the evidence that we have. We feel like we act according to our own compulsion, and that compulsion is influenced by our past. But is that really saying anything new? Our past, of course, reflects on our present. We can't use the future in our decision-making processes, but we can certainly project what might happen in the future, and we use that, or we make that projection based on our past experiences. So of course our past affects our future, and of course the things that we do are significantly impacted by the past. If I was beaten severely by my father growing up, I would probably be afraid of my father or hate my father. I wasn't, so I don't. That's, to me, a perfectly reasonable explanation of the deterministic side of the universe. Yes, things affect us. Yes, the universe around us affects us. And what we should be concerned about with that is not, does that take away all meaning from our life? It should be, does that give meaning to our life? Because what I do then, what I'm saying right now, the fact that I didn't go to church this morning with my wife and son so I could do this show, that affects things. I don't live in a vacuum. My actions go well beyond just me. And this book I recommend to be read in that framework. Again, it's Beyond Freedom and Dignity. I'm not going to lie, this is a tough read. It's not written in the easiest sense. So it's for people who are a little bit more dedicated to the question than I am. Fantastic concept, something I really recommend people take some time to consider. But I wanted to address that, and it's one thing that Alan I know has talked about quite a bit. So since I have his show to play with right now, I wanted to address that directly. Under atheism, which is a silly term, by the way, but as an atheist, under naturalism, under the scientific naturalist viewpoint or worldview, yes, things may be deterministic. Our past plays a role in our present, and our present plays a role in our future. And I wanted to leave you with that. That the New Covenant Group is about using that. We are taking advantage of the fact that, yes, what we do today affects not only ourselves, it affects everybody around us. It is something that is an opportunity to use. And does that mean that you're coming up with this, oh, I'm going to make this opportunity happen as a completely spontaneous thing? No, I'm hoping that what I'm saying today is going to affect you in that decision. I'm doing this because other things have happened to me, and I'm hoping that what I'm saying today will be in some way an inspiration to you to become part of the New Covenant Group, to step out of your comfort zone and to challenge the reasons that people believe things, the consequences of those beliefs, and to encourage and to give myself a little bit of a lead into my show, to inspire honesty in those around you and to strive for it yourself. That's all I have for today. I won't be back in this time slot next week, but I appreciate the opportunity to give my 2 cents, or I guess 50 minutes probably counts as a little bit more than 2 cents. But thank you. This has been Greg Brahe filling in for Alan Darley in his time slot for Good Reasons to Believe. This show, I'm hoping, was not just good reasons to believe, though, but also good reasons not to. Oh, I do have a viewer comment before I go that I just saw. So is Michael Shermer's book your authority? No. In short, I'll say no. But I will say that Michael Shermer has an intellectual authority, and we cannot confuse the difference between somebody who has studied and researched and the authority of science and compelling evidence over authority of this guy is my boss, so he tells me what's real and what's not. Have a great day. Join us again next week in this time slot for Alan Darley's Good Reasons to Believe, and join me again from 6 to 7 for Inspiring Honesty with Bob Graves. Thank you.